Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking to Milo Callaghan all about his TV series, The Rainmaker. And one of the first things that I wanted to ask you about was going through the audition process for this role, because I feel like each of the stages is such a wonderful opportunity to start really getting to know more layers of a character as you go through that. And so I was interested in how each of the stages of auditioning really helped you to learn this character of Rudy Baylor.
Yeah, it's a great question. I like it was one of those scripts that was doing the rounds. I was helping a lot of friends with it, and every time I was helping them, people were sort of really immersed in the legalese. There were a lot of I think what Michael wanted to get right in casting this part was somebody who could kind of handle that, and it is sort of tricky territory. Um, that came quite naturally to me. So for me, the audition process was about what really stood out to me immediately was his family dynamic, like his relationship with his family. And I think that was kind of the route, kind of why I sort of sailed through those different stages was because I think a lot of people were like, this is a lawyer. I don't want to speak for people, but these are my friends that I was helping out. Were like, this is a lawyer. How do we how do we play a lawyer? And for me, he's not yet. You meet him, he's a 22-year-old kid. He's just graduated from law school. He has a girlfriend. He looks after his mom. Um, and he's passionate and he's ambitious and he's a little bit quirky. And so those are the things that I really honed in on. And I think that's what sort of landed me where I landed.
I love that, and especially with what you were just saying about his relationship with his family, and particularly with his mum. And it's very much the two of them after having lost his brother. And so, did filming that first episode and getting to kind of play out some of that relationship and really find it in real time really help with setting the stage the rest of the series for you?
Definitely, definitely. Those opening scenes are well, that's exactly to touch on that point from earlier. That was what I focused on in the audition. There's a great scene with Dot Black later on in the series where I basically explain and I talk about what happened, and that was one of the audition scenes. And as soon as I read that, I just connected so um, deeply and ferociously with that idea of family and the concept of losing somebody. And um, really, that was what drew me and made me feel passionate to tell the story. It was a guy trying to be his brother, trying to be everything that his brother was to him. And I have three brothers, but I've been chasing my oldest for 18 years, 19 years. It took me really to go, okay, I gotta do this by myself now. And definitely those early scenes with his mom were an anchor for sure.
We also see him literally wearing his brother's suit, and part of it's because he doesn't have the money yet to buy his own one. But I love the detail of how when you step back and you look at you in that suit, it's clearly not tailored specifically to you. It's made for someone else. And so I just wanted to ask about that costume detail and how that also really helped as well.
It was amazing. We actually very early on, I went in and Susan, who was our wonderful head of costume, had a lot of hugely oversized suits, and was like the whole idea is it doesn't fit him. But for me, it was like, but he's not that. Surely he's not that different to his brother. I like and I love that you picked up on that. It's just a little bit tight in the wrong places. It's a little bit loose on the legs, and it became a real um, kind of motif throughout the shooting. And I was sad to see it go up as well. Definitely. Michael always talked about how the series was about the coming of age story of Rudy Baylor, and what I loved about that was that I wasn't playing any results, and when you meet him, he's not this hero that he has the potential to be, and definitely that's in the suit for sure.
Right. I think there's something really great about watching him come into himself a little bit more episode by episode, like you just described, and kind of seeing him gradually grow his confidence. And I wanted to ask about the way in which you kind of found that growth and that confidence that you wanted to flourish a little bit more.
As an actor or as a in
Yeah, like in the character.
definitely I got bolder as the show went on. I think you land in this place and I had to go toe to toe with John Slattery, and I had all these incredible, really top of their game actors around me, and that was intimidating at the beginning. And in lots of ways, I lived that journey myself because I had to earn my stripes. I had to. I think it took a minute for them all to be like, okay, you can do this, and that probably coincided with Rudy's journey. I remember Michael pulled me aside at one point around episode 6 and said, like it's really fulfilling to see you grow alongside this character because it was the first time I'd shouldered something like that over such a we shot for 7 months and um, yeah, it was quite special actually to lean into that confidence as we went.
I love that. And you mentioned going toe to toe with John Slattery. And the first instance that we see of that is your character working at his law firm. And, he shows up late and he also isn't afraid to back down from the challenge of pushing back on some of what he's being told. But he also has studied him and, he has the goods to back it up, even though it doesn't end well for him. And I was interested in kind of what felt important to Rudy in that moment, in really not being afraid to back down and also not willing to back down because what he believes and feels is more important at the end of the day.
Mm. It's another motif of the character. He's a real sort of brawler and he's scrappy and I think he felt grounded. I really sort of leaned into um, I leaned into this from my personal life. This idea of coming from a place that is different to where he currently is, and I think that he's more grounded than a lot of those people in that room in that scene because there's a sense of entitlement to that world, and there's a sense of privilege that Rudy doesn't have, and it requires him. Although the series is a process of him, I think, becoming, and ultimately it's the journey towards. Um, he does begin from this place of he has all the ingredients to be this moral hero, but it's like he has to. It's the discipline, and we would talk a lot about the mentors that he meets along the way, and Bruiser and Deck, and even Sarah to a certain extent, who teach him things about himself. But he is just he stands on his own 2 feet. He's not afraid to tell the truth, which is something that I admire greatly about him. And in the pursuit of truth, he burns away all of the dishonesty and corruption around him, and ultimately becomes a mentor. I think he teaches the people in it's a two-way street. He teaches all the people around him um, some moral, gives them all some moral groundwork.
I love that description. And also with some of what you're touching upon there, which is, he's perceived by the world in a certain way, but that's not actually the reality. There's a lot more underneath the surface, and he doesn't come from the level of privilege that people assume that he does because he's studying law and he's about to work at a huge law firm when we first meet him. And it feels like it's always important to him to let people know that his story is something different because that's also how he connects to people in a lot of ways that we see in the show.
Mm.
What did you find his experience was in the world of the perception versus the reality that constantly is at play for him?
Yeah, it was absolutely fascinating. I'm thinking in particular that scene with where he signs Dot Black in the first
Mm.
episode, and she says, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't understand that, I think she says, and he says, you don't know a thing about me. On the level of privilege, because she's talking about Donnie Ray and his lack of education, and also on the level of emotion and losing somebody, and on the surface, I think he presents, and this is something that I get thrown back at me quite a bit in my personal and maybe sometimes my professional life. He presents as having uh, he has his walls up, and there's a degree of protection of his um, emotions, and I think that comes for Rudy from this place of having lost his brother and had a huge wound stretched open. That at the beginning of the series, I still don't think he confronts. I think it's the root of a lot of his anger and a lot of his sort of inability to assimilate and accept what's going on around him. Um, and also where he comes from, this world that he moves in, and this relationship that he's in with this beautiful girl who knows essentially nothing of where he comes from, and that tension was a real joy to lean into.
Right, because I think it goes back to what you just mentioned as well about he has certain walls up and he really loves his girlfriend and they clearly have a close relationship. And at the same time, it's just little things like the idea of if they moved in together and she's like, well, my parents' money would pay for my rent. You know, they can pay your rent too. It's fine. And to him, that's a line that he doesn't want to cross. Was that something that you found throughout the scripts that there were constantly moments of him just having his own lines and his own parameters and really feeling like I don't want to take from other people. I have to be able to pay my own way.
Definitely, definitely, and he's principled, and I think that's partly why, as the series progresses and he takes responsibility. It's a really I love the team element, the way we split. I love Jay Lime and Stone. I love that we're in a taco hut. I love that it's PJ Byrne and Lana Parrilla. I love that we are just the underdogs from the off. I love that it mirrors the dynamic between Brad, Sarah, and Leo, and how Leo's pushing Sarah to be what she becomes, and Rudy is driving himself to be what he becomes in lots of ways. That he's being held back. Everybody's trying to grab his reins all the time, and I don't think that is. I suppose there is an element of ambition because he had this job and he loses it, and there's an idea, I think, at the start of the series that he might try and work his way back, but in the end, that falls away to his principles and his pursuit of truth. And yeah, definitely, it's threaded as a narrative throughout the series.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point because he takes this job with Lana's character Jocelyn out of necessity because he can't get hired anywhere because it's already past
Mm,
hiring season, and then it feels like that becomes the perfect place for him to be. And what were a lot of the things that you started to feel instilled in him from that relationship with Jocelyn because she becomes someone that he can kind of really look to and learn from in a lot of ways.
definitely, she's a harsh mentor for him without a doubt. I mean, it's funny. I think this show is so well cast in terms of not me, but the people around me. In that that's I think Lana would say that that's a new character for her to play, Jocelyn, but she has all of the workings in her of being this like strong-minded, she's this incredibly driven, smart woman who really just doesn't take waffle. And then but she's a much more caring person, Lana, I think, in terms of like how she played Bruiser. Um, he learns his limitations because she's constant. Like he learns that it's important to observe your limitations. He learns the importance of truth. He learns the importance of honor. He's really like Rudy when you meet him, I think, is this bund like I said before, is this bundle of potential, and he's being shaped and morphed by all the people around him. And he could go in any direction, really, but he needs the people who grab hold of him and pull him back a little bit. Like that scene, I don't know if you saw it in episode, I think it's episode 5, when he goes head to head with Sarah and she
Yeah.
wipes the floor with him, right? And that is just she has a phrase in it. She talks about Michael would always talk about it. The flip side of your best quality is your worst quality. She always says, and the flip side of his confidence is his arrogance and the fact that he just keeps going and he assumes nothing's ever gonna get in his way. And him learning temperance, this is a very long-winded answer to say that him learning temperance from Bruiser and holding back and not being a greyhound in the slips, just ready to go, is a huge it's a huge part of his journey that leads to where he will end up as we get to the end of the series.
I can't wait to see the rest of that. I mean, you also have so many great two-handers with PJ Byrne in the series as well. And there's kind of interesting dynamic between the two of them because his character is not afraid to do things outside of the parameters and,
Yeah.
questionable legal tactics as well at times. And you kind of see that Rudy wants to do whatever it takes, but he also does have certain values and morals and lines that he doesn't feel as comfortable crossing. And so I just wanted to ask about finding the dynamic of all those two-handers and how you feel like that starts to open him up and to think differently.
Mm. On a professional level, PJ is just now one of my best friends. He's incredible and so funny and so open-hearted and has all of the elements of. I mean, he's a voraciously intelligent man, but he has all of the elements of Deck that make Deck so lovable and so like so much why you root for him. So that kind of fell out of the sky and landed in my lap. That was I couldn't have asked for a better person to do that with. Um, in terms of yeah, I think where Bruiser holds him back, Deck pushes him on and is there that he has a great monologue, short monologue saying he says I'm better than any limp dick wannabe lawyer like Rod Nunley any day of the week, right? And he teaches Rudy that within his moral principles and within the confines of what he's learned, it's all grays and it's all human. And like approaching, for example, the case with Dot from a human level is no matter what the result. Somebody said to me recently, live with cause and let the universe take care of the results. And Bruiser is very results oriented, so she's pulling him back. Deck, I think, is very process oriented, and he's saying just let's just live with the cause and not how do we get there, but how do we be? And so colors just outside the lines a little bit, and it really gives Rudy the opportunity to just go. And I think the merger of the two of them is like the perfect team.
Yeah, there's also a moment in episode 2 with the two of them where Rudy's kind of really confronted with the reality of the danger of the things that they're starting to uncover and question and the answers that they're trying to find along the way. But it doesn't feel like that stops him in any way. It almost kind of feels like it makes him realize the importance of the work that they're doing and getting justice for the people that he's representing now. And so I was just curious about kind of what you really found in the way that that doesn't hold him back, but actually spurs him on.
He has a fearlessness that I think at the beginning when you meet him is slightly unhealthy or unproductive. Um, I mean, you see it in the scene with John's character Leo when he gets fired. You see it. He has a kind of impulsiveness and a jump first, ask questions later, which serves him a lot of the time. But and the times it doesn't serve him, it can go really wrong. Um, but he I mean, I don't know. I think the great thing about that dynamic between Rudy and Deck is that they're just on an adventure, and I think, it was pitched to me early on as a love story between Rudy and Sarah, and sometimes I think there's a bit of a love story with Rudy and Deck, and I'm so here for it, you know.
I love that. And it completely makes sense when you look at the scenes with them as well. And
Mm.
with what you were just mentioning as well, with like the impulsiveness and the emotion of the character, it also feels like there's a lot in terms of his anger. And Bruiser's very much someone who's trying to encourage him, like, channel that for your clients, channel that into the work that you're doing. And if you use it in the right way, this can be your greatest power. And for you, did you find that that anger that he sometimes has in certain instances came from the experience of losing his brother and everything following that, or did you find that there were other places that it came from for you as well?
Mm, I think yeah, I think that's definitely what I led with. The majority of the work that I did uh, was quite personal and was rooted in a family dynamic and thinking about those relationships. So definitely, I think that's a huge part of what drives him day to day, and maybe when that unhinges and is unleashed, I'd say that's probably at the root of it. I think there's also he has an idea about fairness in the world, and I think that is a probably a result of coming from a single parent household and you know in lots of ways, his older brother, would have, at least in my experience of my life, like the older brother would have been the spearhead of that, if that makes sense. And when he goes, there's a real sense of, Rudy's not an older brother. He's not a father figure. He's had a shadow to move through the sun in, and he's had sort of wind tunnel to jump in behind, and he's been streamlined through his life. And there's that great scene with his mom, I think in episode 6, where she's saying, you're not John Baylor, you're Rudy Baylor." And that was really an interesting moment for me as an actor, because I felt that with the work that I'd done. I felt like, and I looked at my relationship with my older brother, and I thought, that's a real thing, for somebody to almost confuse their identities and see somebody going before them, and anything that I do in your footsteps is not going to be problematic for me. And it's a hard thing to do, to then step out of that slipstream and go it alone. Um, so yeah.
Definitely. And looping back as well to, you were describing earlier how the show in essence is this journey of him becoming himself. There's a lot of moments in which we almost get to see him running and then learning to walk afterwards, because in working for someone like Bruiser, she kind of really lets him off the leash in a lot of ways. You know, we see him getting to give a deposition. We see him standing up in court, while Sarah in her law firm is still very much kind of sitting at the table being quiet. She hasn't been kind of led into those situations just yet. And it's kind of fun to get to see him do these things and figure it out in real time and really figure out what he's doing. And so I also wanted to just ask about getting to go through all these experiences that he's having, but then getting to look at how is he going to kind of stumble on his feet and find his way, but in real time as he's doing all of this.
Hmm. That was the joy of doing it, really. Sometimes when I watch it, I see everybody has a really strong arc. Like, I love Sarah's arc in it. I love Leo's arc, like Bruiser and Deck, and Kelly, and there's all of, and Dan Fogler's character. There's all of these like incredible, tight, beautifully woven stories, and sometimes I think that Rudy's just living through all of them. So there were days when I went in, I mean, lots of days when I went in with my idea of what I wanted to do, or several ideas of what I wanted to do, and it all had to go out the window because there was so many voices in that creative experience. But that was kind of the joy of getting to go in and do it every day with different people. Was, okay, well, you run and let me kind of experience what you're doing and respond, and let's see where we go. And that meant that I didn't always know what was going to happen. And it's part of the joy of flicking through the show, is that sometimes I made so many choices on a day that it's interesting to see where Michael took it in the edit. And um, I guess what I love about Rudy as well is that he's not an explainer, he's a doer. And so you get a real good sense of his, even when he's doing something that appears on the surface to be maybe sketchy or slightly immoral, or you're not sure why he's doing it with so much he's got so much courage of conviction in his choices, that over time I feel like you just go with him. Like, you don't have to question him, because you know that whatever he's doing, he's doing it because he believes it's the right thing to do.
And with what you just described about really trying a lot of different directions and trying a lot of different choices throughout all of the scenes, did a lot of that stem from the fact that we see him go through so many firsts? You know, we see the first time that he's allowed to stand up and speak in court. We see the first time that he's leading a deposition. Everything that he's doing is for the first time. So he doesn't have a pattern of, this is how I usually do it. And so was a lot of the trying different choices very much also just the character really discovering, how am I going to be in this situation for you?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And again, that was really the joy of doing the job, was just discovering that in real time. And you know, I think you really do come to know, when you walk in someone's shoes for 6 months, you do get a much greater sense of who they are on any given day, or the choices that they might make. But one of the beauties of working with the people that I got to work with was I had so much stimuli around me, and so many different opportunities to explore different avenues, and so much of a net behind me if I fell, to a certain extent, because of the experience of all the people who were in the room with me. That the product of that felt very productive for the creativity of the show and the character.
And with what you were just explaining as well about getting to really learn how this character does things as you go, what do you feel like were some of the things that you learned about Rudy as a character throughout the course of filming that maybe you hadn't surmised right at the beginning when you read the first
Mm,
script?
mm. A great question. I think I honestly I didn't feel his in all my prep, I didn't feel his anger at all. And I had maybe 6 to 8, maybe 2 months to prep, and a lot of it was dialect work, and I was leaning into my own experiences and trying to find maybe where I would have been a few years ago and in my personal life. But when I got on set and the other pieces fell into place, being a little bit of whatever it may be, costume or hair, or more importantly, the actors opposite me and what they were bringing, I felt so much consternation at the injustice of what was going on in every scene that I just felt myself getting more and more frustrated. And you know, I think there's a an entitlement that comes with, I mean, what Michael wrote was an incredibly intelligent, um, really well-spoken character who had a great grasp of words, and but coming from a place where maybe that isn't necessarily a given, and he worked as hard as he. I mean, I think Sarah says he can cite case law like no one she's ever met, and and so for me, I felt suddenly this sense of intellectual entitlement to. I felt the unfairness of where he begins and where he's immediately knocked off and into. I felt it was unfair that he ended up at J Line and Stone. I felt it was unfair the way that Sarah was treating him. I felt the relationship with Leo, it was all just unfair. And um, as an actor, that was maybe surprising that that came up and then stayed throughout, really. But I guess that is his driving force, I think to some extent part of my job was to drive through the scenes in a way that we kept moving, and I think it needed that energy behind it.
It's almost like the show says it's his greatest asset and his greatest weakness at the same time.
Big time.
Well, I really, really enjoyed your performance throughout the first few episodes and look
Mara,
forward to
that's so
watching the
kind.
rest. Yeah, thank you so much, Milo. Appreciate it.
Thank you for talking.